Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi mining community, welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast. And we have a returning guest today who appeared back in December 2022, so just over 18 months ago, which was episode 298. We have Alex Walker, who's the CEO of Xplor Resources, who are a company focused in discovery and development of gold, rare earths and copper deposits in Kazakhstan, and have recently been part of BHP's Xplor program. Alex is an investment banker and resources executive based full-time in Kazakhstan. Originally from Australia, he's also a former captain in the Australian Army Reserve and has over 15 years mining finance and management experience. And he's going to give us an update on Xplor Resources since we last spoke, their experience and takeaways from the Xplor program that they've just participated in, and the progress that they're going to be making across their assets over the coming years. So that's welcome Alex to the podcast. How you doing, Alex?
Yeah, very well, thanks, Rob. Thanks for the kind introduction.
Yeah, no worries. As I mentioned, we spoke about 18 months ago. So all those that are listening, appreciate if you can go back and listen to that episode. And why I encourage that is you can obviously, once you've listened to this, see how far Alex and Xplor Resources have gone or have come now to what they did 18 months ago. So appreciate if you go back and listen to that episode also after listening to this. So for those that obviously didn't listen to that episode and may not know of you, which I'm sure a lot of our audience will do, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background and about your career? And as I mentioned, you were obviously in the Australian Army. And obviously been in the mining industry for 15 years. So I'll hand it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, Rob, thanks. Well, in fact, the right introduction might even be, we put together a 5-minute pitch as part of the end of the BHP Xplor program, which really dabbles on, our introduction to Kazakhstan, the chronological history of Xplor and where we are today as a company. And so for those who are a little bit time poor, that's probably a really good one to watch, a 5-6 minute video, which gives a real update on where we are today. But for me personally, certainly, I grew up I was born in Cornwall, in fact, in the UK. So arguably mining's very much in my blood. Going from there to Western Australia, it was hard to point me in a different direction, I suspect. But I did go through the financial route. As you say, I worked for Patterson Securities in Perth for about 7 years and then moved to London with them in 2013. And then I jotted around a few different investment banks, finishing with Pareto, which is a large Norwegian investment bank in London. And at that time, I started a company that we listed on the ASX with a friend of mine, David Minchin, who some of your listeners might know. He was doing helium things at the moment with Helix and prior to that, Helium One. So David and I founded that company, and we were focused on vanadium in Sweden. We still think it's probably one of the largest, if not the largest, vanadium deposit on the planet. But there was a couple of things that were causing that to go a lot slower than we'd hoped, and certainly than junior companies can hope to progress. And so we were basically looking to diversify at that point in time while that project was slowly progressing. And we got really excited about Kazakhstan for a few reasons. One was there was another sedimentary hosted vanadium project in Kazakhstan. And from a top-down approach, we were really trying to understand which jurisdictions were going, for lack of a better word or terminology, in the right direction in terms of understanding the mining industry and in terms of ease of doing business. And there were very few jurisdictions going in the right direction. So we, using that top-down approach, looking through Africa, through Europe, obviously the traditional jurisdictions of Australia and Canada, we end up looking in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And Kazakhstan was a real standout for us. They just changed their mineral code in 2018. we did, a number of visits there. We met with the sovereign mining company, Talcan Samruk, and, reviewed over 150 projects over the course of 2019. And we very much were convinced that this was a place that we really wanted to do business. And so with COVID coming, obviously travel became rather restricted. Investment appetite, let's say, became rather restricted in its jurisdictional application. Lots of people, in Australia preferred to invest in Australia because you could go there at the time. And so that entity basically did a deal for an Australian asset. And David and I said, very, very happy to sort of hand over the keys of that. We were committed to doing other things, and I really wanted to run with Kazakhstan. So that was the right thing to do at the time. And I basically spent, the better part of a year and a half turning that Kazakhstan dream into a reality, and listing it on the London Stock Exchange, which was about 4 months after I moved my family to Kazakhstan, which was August 2021. So that's the setup. And I'm happy to then run down and talk through what we've been doing since then, if you like.
Yeah, well, I wonder if you can just tell us just a brief overview of East Star Resources, and I suppose what you have been doing in the last 18 months since we last spoke.
Sure. So, our initial focus was on orogenic gold and VMS assets in Kazakhstan. Orogenic gold in the Chuili orogenic gold belt, and VMS, volcanogenic massive sulfides, in the Rudny Altai belt. And what we had was some drill-ready prospects and targets, quite a lot of very high-grade gold from surface in a really, really interesting belt. And from the VMS side, we had what we knew was quite a lot of data to collect to progress those and make those drill-ready. So we started with the gold and progressed those, and we spent the better part of 18 months collecting and digitizing data on the VMS licenses. Obviously, as things progress, we need to allocate capital as best we can for the assets which we believe have the best opportunity to provide value for shareholders. And over time, it became pretty clear to us that the VMS assets were where the vast majority of that allocation should be. So that also came at a time, coincidentally, that we were becoming hugely bullish on copper. And so while we dabbled in a few other things, you mentioned at the start, rare earths, we tried that momentarily. It became very, very clear that from a big company perspective, from a market perspective, and from a global thematic perspective, that copper was the place that we really, really needed to be. And so that really took our focus. We digitized over 45,000 meters of drilling on the Verkhuba asset. We progressed a number of other targets and continue to progress a number of other targets within our license package there. And we drilled the Verkhuba target, and we ended up converting that to a JORC compliant resource in March of this year, 2024, of just over 20 million tonnes at about 1.12% copper, with some zinc and some lead thrown in as well. So that's a huge achievement. Ultimately, it was about $4 per tonne of exploration expense on that particular asset for a commodity that's trading just under $10,000 a tonne at the moment. Isn't a bad result. So ultimately, we're looking to progress that asset now. We're looking to continue to de-risk some of the other targets, because the belt is exceptional. I mean, what you have is 800 kilometres of strike where there's an incredibly high-grade mine every time that it outcrops, and then nothing where it doesn't outcrop. And so that's not typically how these deposit systems work. And we feel there's a lot more opportunity to discover some mines under just a little bit of cover here as well. So we're really excited about the potential for this belt, and really excited about the style of exploration we're doing, introducing new concepts in searching for VMS deposits in what is just absolutely inundated with infrastructure. We've got several processing plants within 50, 60 kilometres of the Verkhuba deposit, and some of our other targets are considerably closer. All of them are hungry, underfed today. Smelters within 70 kilometres. You really couldn't ask for more in terms of infrastructure. So we're really, really excited about the prospectivity of that area.
Yeah, just wondering if you just tell us a little bit about the Verkhuba deposit. You said that you were undertaking a particular process there, and I wonder how that was going.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, part of it was well, not even part of a significant portion of it was a difficulty in trying to get across certainly what we felt is a significantly more value on the asset than we were being provided in the market. So we were looking at what would cost shareholders to take that asset forward through pre-feasibility. In my view, it would cost around 2 million. Arguably, we could do it for cheaper, but around $2 million to take it from where it is today, which is as I said, a JORC inferred resource through to a pre-feasibility study. And at the time, we were trading, fairly low at about 1.5p, around a sort of $4-5 million valuation. So it was giving up, a third of the value of that asset to dilute to take it forward in house. So it was a difficult decision for the management to try and assess what we would do. Do we sit on it for a while longer and see if markets improve and slow march the project? At that point in time, we'd had a number of sort of approaches, and then we actually had one approach which was a bit less, hey, we're interested, and a bit more, here's an offer. And so at that time, we decided it was in our shareholders' best interest to run a formal process over several months to try and assess if that is the best offer for the company. And we've been doing that since then, and it's let's say getting towards the tail end of that process, very much so now.
You mentioned obviously you're advancing other VMS targets. Just wondering, you just tell us a little bit more about some of those particular targets and assets.
Sure. So they're a lot earlier stage than Verkhuba. That was an easy one ultimately to advance without initially very much money, because we had 45,000 meters of drill data. So we were able to digitize. I mean, that would cost $10 million to replicate today. So we were able to digitize that, hand it to a completely independent consultant and say, look at this and tell us what you think. Is this a deposit? And is it worth, exploring further to turn it into a reality? And the answer came back with a pretty unequivocal yes. So, it was an easy decision for the board to commit to drilling that. But we still don't think that's the best deposit that we'll have in our portfolio, and certainly on the belt. We just need to find the other ones that are a little bit harder than having 45,000 meters of drilling. We've got a prospect which we've talked about in the past called Talovskoy, which we're still doing mapping and lithogeochemical work over. We sampled that several times over the last couple of years, and we've got incredibly high grades. I mean, we're talking, a rock chip of 8% copper, more than 20% lead, 4 or 5% zinc, and multiple grams of gold and silver. And so, it's that sort of asset which, once we truly understand exactly what we're targeting there, then we'll know how to approach that from an exploration perspective, i.e., how do we de-risk the drilling, which is the most expensive part of the exploration. So that's one target. And on top of that, we've got a number of other ones which are showing really interesting surface expressions, some of them with limited surface expressions because of the fact that we're looking undercover. So we've been able to find, some outcropping at surface, which is showing the same alteration style as you see in the other mines, both current producing and past producing mines on the belt. And we've got IP anomalies and EM anomalies over those, which make them look like incredibly interesting targets right along the fault zone. And so now we're just trying to understand exactly what geochemical work we need to do to really de-risk it before it warrants a drill hole. We're ultimately prioritizing these targets. So we've got 6 or 7 of those at the moment, and we've probably got another 15 or so more that's had a bit less work, a bit less data on it that we'd still continue, we'd like to continue to progress. But ultimately, it's those 6 or 7 that we really hope to progress at least 3 to being drill ready this year. So a lot of that was refined, by the way, initially from our heliborne electromagnetic survey, which is it's the ultimate technique in finding massive sulfide systems, so perfect for VMS. And so now we're just, as I say, we're going through these methodically to make sure that we're drilling the right ones first. Just to give a bit more of flavour, I guess, it's really understanding the system that we're in. And again, some of this has come from BHP and some of this has come from discussing VMS with globally renowned experts. For those that have been following us closely, they would have seen that we had the likes of Bruce Gamel review our project. So he's known as Mr. VMS globally, and agree with our thesis and help us with our exploration approach. But part of that's been getting access to the other deposits, current and past producing. So we've now been down several of them, of the mine shafts. We've sampled the footwall and the hanging wall. We've been in the old pits and done the same thing to really build out the lithogeochemical signature of these mines, so we can use that as a relatively definitive targeting tool to make sure we're in the right horizon before we start drilling EM IP anomalies. So it's been a lot of detailed work, years that has gone into the belt breakdown. We're at the cusp of it at the moment, to the point that we're feeling really confident when we do start drilling these targets later on this year.
I wonder if you just tell us a little bit more about the porphyry work you've sort of done, and obviously being part of the Xplor program.
Absolutely. So porphyries are an interesting one, I feel, for a junior company to tackle. I've always known about the potential of the Balkhash belt. Northern Balkhash has been a prolific region for the exploration work that was done. It's got, for those who are unaccustomed, it's got the Actigite porphyry cluster, which is more than 10 million tonnes of contained copper and in the lowest quartile of production costs globally. That's owned by Kaz Minerals. And it's had past producers such as Conrad, which was a really good grade and multi-million tonne deposit as well. Most would consider tier 1 deposit as well, on 2 different parts of the belt. But it's not a well understood belt in terms of the work that was done. So one of the perfect things that you look for in porphyry exploration is a silica lithocap. And any porphyry expert will tell you, if you're going to start somewhere, start around the silica lithocaps. And there's hundreds of these. The USGS sort of labelled them with their targeting and put out easily more than 100 across the Balkhash-Shelley magmatic arc. But they were classed poorly by the Soviets. They were classed as secondary quartzites and not well understood. And it was also a lack of understanding of what we now have, with the likes of Halley and so on writing these fantastic papers on using geochemistry to understand where you are in a porphyry system, that we can now do things like soil sampling at surface, which give us a real indication of how high or low we are in the porphyry system. And therefore, is the target too deep, or is it shallow enough, or where might it be in this system? So we're using these modern techniques, modern porphyry exploration models, to approach the belt. But stepping back from that, what the Xplor program has brought in is this mineral systems approach, which is even greater scale. And what we did as part of that program is we've done a full plate tectonic and kinematic reconstruction of this entire belt. And in all honesty, it goes above my head in the level of ability of these people to talk about the chronology of faults and currently active and passive faults, and obviously the time of emplacement, crustal thickness, and so on. So we've done a really detailed breakdown to understand if this belt is even where one wants to be, despite the fact that it's got these great big deposits. Do you want to be in the belt, or where do you want to be in the belt? To de-risk some of these silica lithocaps. So we've done that full breakdown now to understand, roughly where we want to be in terms of proximity to these faults. And also we've done full satellite spectral imaging, which give a beautiful breakdown of different alteration styles. So the size of the potential alteration halos and targets therein. So it's prioritized targets for us over more than 200,000 square kilometers. We're still going through the process of ranking and prioritizing those targets, but we feel pretty confident that what we see is very, very interesting, and hopefully it's the sort of thing that would attract the further partnership with a major, BHP or otherwise, that we can really start to take these things forward. So it's really exciting work. I would comfortably say that E-Star now has an understanding of the belt that's as good as or anyone else that's been working there for even decades or 5 or 10 years and certainly better than 99% of other players on the belt. So I think that's a really exciting approach to take these things forward.
Yeah. I wonder if you just tell us about the obviously Xplor program. I know it lasts for about 6 months and obviously may continue after then. But I just wonder if you just tell us about obviously some of the key takeaways that you got from being part of that program. And what does it mean for the company to be part of that program and go through that? And sort of what did also the company get from being part of this Xplor program?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. It's a really interesting one. There's so much to focus on. Firstly, I'm focusing on the process itself to get into the program. They had well over 500 applicants and they took 6. So you're already in effect in the 1% club, which we have a laugh about. 1% of exploration targets become mines. Well, in some ways, we'll argue that we've already been filtered. At least the 6 of us have already been filtered to a relative degree. So even making it through that is pretty exceptional. So you've got, are they interested in the area, or are they interested in the concept, and are they interested in the team? And so that's another big part of it. Does the team have the capacity to apply the techniques that they give us to undertake successful and safe exploration? And so having that backing from a strategy perspective, but also from a team perspective, was massive validation of us and the work that we've put in Kazakhstan as a team. So that was fantastic. The program itself, it starts in January. You start with boot camp, which is an initial education. There's all kinds of masterclasses, everything from a porphyry masterclass or a plate tectonic masterclass or a sedimentary copper masterclass and lots of everything in between, to also focusing on occupational health and safety, above ground risk, communications, and any number of other things. Throughout the course of the program, you've got your business lead and your technical lead. I'm the business lead, and Chris Van Wyk was the technical lead. And we sort of diverge a little bit, and I go and do very regular catch-ups with very, very senior people. We're talking the ex-head of exploration for BHP, who was a mentor on the program and provided leadership coaching, and other people that provided mentorship in terms of transition, how to grow your business, how to scale. So there was a lot that it entailed, and throughout all of that, there's pretty constant and consistent due diligence as well. BHP are constantly running the ruler over us, looking at risks to their business and working with us, risks to working in Kazakhstan ultimately, and everything else, everything in between, our service providers, the way we operate. So they've been fairly consistently over 6 months conducting due diligence on us. It'd be hard pressed to say that anyone else would do it to that degree. So it was time consuming, but I could say, having got through the end of it, it feels like a real success for us having achieved that. And what it means for the company really is providing independent analysis of our company, of our strategy, of our team. You've got a myriad of technical experts from the BHP team, from the head of copper, head of porphyry exploration, head of new projects, to people involved in deep crustal analysis and really their mineral systems framework, reviewing our strategy and giving us their feedback. So for us, this would have cost us, just from an advice perspective, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to the place that we are today. And on top of that, they gave us $500,000 to actually conduct a lot of the work as well. So we've been able to get 2 targets on the belt. We've been able to advance those in terms of soil sampling, and we've been doing spectral analysis on all of those as we speak. And they'll be heading off for ICPMS in the very near future. And we've been able to do the full reconstruction of the belt from a structural perspective, as well as the spectral work. So, what it's done is it's advanced 2 projects significantly, and it's given us this massive, fantastic pipeline and understanding of a huge belt that's expected to contain an undiscovered at least 22 million tonnes of copper, and put us right up the front, and we haven't paid a cent for it. So it's been massive for all of those reasons. I could talk a lot more, I think, about all of the other bits, business chemistry and so on, but I'm not sure that investors get super excited about that. But there's a lot of soft skills which come with it as well, which I'm really pleased to have been able to introduce to the team, and really professionalize the way that we operate from a stakeholder analysis perspective, from a safety perspective, and so on. So it's a really good place to be. I feel like a much more, for lack of a better word, grown up company, I think, off the back of that.
Good. It's good to hear. What about the said hosted copper? Obviously, it's clear there's a major interest in obviously these deposit types. So just why don't you just talk us about obviously, or talk us through this opportunity?
Sure. Well, we're not going through it in too much detail yet, mainly because we haven't quite finalised the targeting work. So we certainly don't want to give anything away. But in his previous life, Chris, our new technical director, was actually the head of said hosted copper exploration for First Quantum. So I feel like we were always going to be driven in that direction as probably someone with better experience than in that deposit type than a significant majority of geologists globally. So from my perspective, that was leaning into his core skill set, which made a lot of sense. It's another one that's difficult to target without a major. It can be very expensive to find said hosted copper deposits because typically there's no direct targeting method, like a geophysical method, which will give you a glaring target, for example. But there's a reason why they're chasing them, and that's because they tend to be, 2+ times the grade of porphyry deposits, and they can be very big. Kazakhstan, for example, has the third largest said hosted copper deposit globally in Kazakhstan in the Chu-Sari-Su basin, and that's 22 million tons of contained copper. So that is a super giant deposit. So when you've got all of these major global companies like Rio Tinto, First Quantum, Fortescue, and BHP looking at where the next major deposit might be, the Chu-Sari-Su basin and the said hosted copper basins in Kazakhstan rank very highly for them. Now, they've not had great access to those basins over the last few decades with moratoriums on licenses in Kazakhstan and a difficult mineral system. It would take years to get licenses, so they've come in and out of the country. But with the introduction of the new mineral code in 2018 and a clear demonstration of that working, with investment going up substantially, with licenses being awarded efficiently, being able to drop licenses efficiently, they've grown in their confidence. And now we've seen, in the last round, 2 major companies bid on a similar license package for said hosted copper. So it is definitely something that's hotting up from the majors' perspective. And we feel like the work that we've been doing the last 6 months puts us ahead of the curve on that. So we hope to play in that. And Touchwood will be having some sort of announcement with regards to licenses and/or partnerships at some point in the not too distant future. But it's an exciting place to be.
A couple more questions. As I mentioned in the introduction, you've obviously moved to Kazakhstan. You moved your family there. How's that going? And also, you started the Kazakhstan Chamber of Mines. So I just wondered if you can just tell us a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. No, it's going well. We're still married. So,
That's good.
So I'm pretty sure it's going well. We've been here for nearly 3 years now. And to repeat some of my BHP Showcase presentation, at first it took some time to understand, the systems and the culture, and building the right team was an integral part of that. But something I probably don't lend enough to in that is my family very much being a part of that team. Their support has been amazing. My wife has settled in incredibly well. In many circles here, I'm known as Rachel's husband. I think for that it's been absolutely fantastic. But the mining network and the expat network here is really good. And what was interesting was this very obvious demand, even from people that have been here as expats and as locals for 20 or 30 years. What they felt was underrepresented. So this sort of kept coming up for us. And there was another couple of small companies here who I don't know what you'd call it, but at the end of the day, it was one of these scenarios where we all said this was a great idea. And it was who's going to run forward, and everyone stepped back, and there was 2 or 3 of us still standing there going, all right, well, I guess that's us then, we'll take the leap. And so, considerable amount of time and effort, free time and effort went into this, and a bit of a leap of faith with us writing the first checks to get the chamber started and start putting the framework in place and hire people to attract new members and so on. But, it's been running for nearly 12 months now. We've got 43 local and international members, I think 44 as of today. And they include Rio Tinto and First Quantum and Fortescue. And touch wood, we'll be getting BHP or, and a few others in the not too distant future. I know Tech's farmed into one of our co-founders, Aris. They've got to deal with them as well. And Eramet and even Kaz Minerals, a big, one of the biggest local producers, has joined. So it's been fantastic from that perspective. And now we've been invited to consult, directly on tax policy and subsoil law with the relevant ministries. And so, our capacity to be heard, influence is growing. Our membership base is growing, and the network is growing off the back of it. But ultimately, the goal is to promote mining and exploration in Kazakhstan. It's headed in the right direction very, very quickly. We will see it jump in the Fraser Institute. It's already starting to go up, but we're going to see it continue to climb in spades. And I've got a lot of confidence that the government is headed down the right path to continue to improve the investment climate. So, we're there to help guide that where we can and help provide advice, but we're also here to help provide advice for people entering the country. Because certainly 3+ years of operating, we've got a few wounds that that we'd be happy to share with other people to help them avoid some of those operating mistakes. So that's been fantastic. It's been a really good way for us to demonstrate our commitment to Kazakhstan and also to measure their commitment to us.
And lastly, what's the next 12 months look like for East Star Resources? And is there any sort of, I suppose, achievements or anything you want to achieve within the next 12 months that you're forecasting to do?
Any number of things I'd like to be achieving, Rob. Yeah. We try to be pragmatic, obviously, with what we put out there in the market. We're running a process for Verkhuba, so I'd like to see that finalised in the near future. And I really want to see these additional targets be the absolute best targets and, unequivocally showing the potential for deposits before we drill them. There's a major catalyst off the back of additional success in this region because these are fantastic high grade, 4-5% copper equivalent deposits that we'd be looking to replicate. And so, they're 2 things that I really want to see happen over the next 6 months. It's not unrealistic to think that we won't have, a couple of joint ventures on the cards as well, either in the Porphyry Exploration or in the SED or both, or something a bit more general. And that's with BHP or a potential other partner. So I'd say that's on the cards. I can't promise it, obviously, to shareholders, but I'd say that's very much on the cards. So, arguably within the next 6 months, 1 or 2 corporate actions, 1 or 2 joint ventures, and potentially a discovery thrown in for the mix. It'll probably, I won't say we'll make a porphyry discovery in the next 6 months. That'll be 2025. Or 2026, but that's on to the next step. So there's a lot of catalysts for us, and there's a lot of things for our team to get stuck into, which is really exciting. We've got, Chris as our new technical director. We've got a new exploration manager who's also been living here for a couple of years and is fantastic in helping bring our policies and our procedures and a bit more methodical approach to the way we're doing things. And I'd say our technical firepower now is absolutely fantastic. So I'm really excited to see what we can achieve with these guys.
Alex, really appreciate the time. Thank you for giving us an update on East Star Resources. And obviously it seems being part of that Xplor program has really, I suppose, accelerated your company over the last 6 months, and obviously moving forward, we're sure we're going to see a lot more from yourself and from East Star Resources. So hopefully, and hopefully you can come back on the podcast either later this year, beginning part of next year, and give us an update on what you've been doing. obviously our audience, if they want to obviously follow your story, as you mentioned that you've got a presentation that you've shown to the BHP Xplor program. I wonder if our audience, if they want to follow your story, get access to that information, what social media channel platforms are you on? Just wonder if you can give us those details.
Sure. We're on, I think it's called X now, isn't it? We're on Twitter X, and we're also on LinkedIn principally is our major platforms. But our website is also estarplc.com. And, we like to keep that updated as well, with our presentations and with the market news. So they're the ways to follow us. Our handle is at EST.
We'll put those in the show notes anyway, accompany this podcast, so for easy access for any of our audience wants to obviously follow your story. And obviously you've made a lot of progress, as I've mentioned, so I'm sure a lot of our audience will be clicking on and looking at what you've done and what you're looking to do in the future. So really appreciate your time, Alex, and good luck for the foreseeable future.
Thanks very much, Robin. Thanks very much for having me on again. Hugely appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for listening, and yourself. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing this episode far and wide. As always mentioned, appreciate if you can pass this obviously podcast on to people within our industry, but really needs to go to people outside of our industry as well. So any friends or family that may know nothing about mining or may take some interest, they may be investors themselves, please keep sharing these episodes with them, and maybe highlight certain points after you've listened to them that they should focus on and have a look. And that's the only way that we're going to improve the branding of our mining industry and make more and more people aware of what we do in this wonderful industry. So really appreciate your continued support, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.